Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. It's a pleasure for me. I actually was 9 years ago on holiday in Estonia, uh, as well in this place, but I never been in your institutions. In my daily life, I'm director of 5 institutions of secure care and professor in changes in youth care in the Netherlands. So the topic just mentioned, is there a need for secure care in the Netherlands, is one of the questions daily is asked to me. Can you diminish the number of places in secure care? Of course, we are not locking up children, aren't we? Sometimes we have to. I'm a very optimistic man, 3 children, a beautiful wife, a good life, but I'm as well interested in the dark side of secure care. That dark side we see every day, every one of you. Every parent in this room knows the moment your kid does something and you feel threatened or you feel angry and you want to do something. I can't hit my child as a parent. I can't. That feeling every professional feels every day in his normal working life. There are youngsters who are challenges our behavior. We like to give them a secure environment, but what are the moments the secure environment becomes a repressive environment? That thin line is my research area. Together with Sophie, who was here twice before, I think. I hope her picture is familiar to you. Thanks to her, she's now in the Caribbean, lying under a palm tree, enjoying a holiday. So I'm doing the work now. The main reason for this talk is this Universal Declaration of the Rights of Children. Every child in this world, every child, should have access to the highest attainable standard of health and facilities of treatment of illness, rehabilitation of health. That's a very important message. That's above the Estonian law. That's what we all agreed on. Keeping that in mind, and knowing that our children in our institutions perform criminal behavior, can have a mild intellectual disability, psychological, psychiatric disorders, perform sexually transgressive behavior, have problems in their family, have financial problems, etc., etc., etc. Those kids, those youngsters, those adolescents can be a potential danger for themselves or their environment. And sometimes we need a secure facility to protect them. All those kids are different. And what is used in the placement of kids in the Netherlands, in the United States, in Australia, all over the world, is a model to try to capture the unique kid perspective. What is the risk for this kid? What is the damage to the child or the damage the child could perform? What are the needs, the treatment needs of this child? And not every child has the same treatment needs. And like Peer told you about the responsivity of the staff, every child has a responsivity for treatment, more or less. So treating a child right means that you have very specific ideas of the risks, the needs, and responsiveness. like you, like I am doing, working in secure use care or forensic use care, is balancing between two main questions: care and treatment of those children and their families and their peers, and creating a safe environment, reducing the risk. And the tools of all of us are power, structure, coercion, and those specific tools can become repressive. Structure is good for a child. A repressive environment gives harm, does harm to the child. What is that repression? And as Peer told you, we don't know that much about repression. And Sophie wrote a scoping review, that's the name in scientific research. So she studied lots and lots and lots of articles, what's written in official international literature about repression. And she started with this definition. Repression is characterized by an authority figure, we all are, in secure use care, intentionally acting in a way that harms the youth, or by an authority figure unlawfully or arbitrarily depriving the youth of autonomy. Thinking about that cell phone, having a normal contact with your peers, is that when you say you are not allowed to use your cell phone in a secure facility, is that a punishment? Is that giving structure? Is that preventing from the drugs throwing over the gate? We have in Holland pizza couriers as well, drug couriers, youngsters on a mobile bike bringing the drugs to the facilities. You can phone them. You can phone the uncle who's a pimp. Then restricting the use of mobile phones is about safety. Normal contact with your peers, using your mobile phone in education, looking for Wikipedia and information, then it's a restriction for your ability to grow. All those kind of ethical questions are in this definition. How does that repression occurs? Who influences who? It's a very complex world inside our institutions. Our youngsters can threaten staff. Staff can punish youngsters. They can interact. They can communicate in all the ways. But the staff is a member of a team. The team members can interact and influence each other. The team leader can influence the staff. And the organization, as in construction, has its rules. Yesterday I was in a facility and I asked, I've got my mobile phone with me. Am I allowed to take a picture in this facility without the kids, of course? They were thinking, yes, you're allowed. We entered the door, and in my facilities, I have to give away my mobile phone when I enter the institution because I could give my mobile phone to a youngster. Because I'm the director, I'm the exception. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but it's in our institution the exception, so I can walk through with my mobile phone. So I asked once again, am I allowed to take with me my mobile phone? Yes, we make an exception of that rules. Organizational rules are to be broken. But why for me and why not for the parent? Those ethical questions, there are always people who make that decision what can be done in this facility and what can't. The question, and I knew that, is a difficult question for an organization, bringing in a mobile phone in a secure facility. But in a normal world, it's a normal question. Asking normal questions is one of the most important things to question about, are we a repressive institution? When you misuse your power, you know youngsters will react aggressive, get demotivated, have stress. Their performance will be worse, and the children's rights are violated. But as well, as a staff member, when there's a lot of aggression, your motivation will lower. So, balancing the questions about repression is about a good working climate and a social climate, as well in the schools, a learning climate. What is underlying that repression? The fear. You could be very anxious about some youngsters. They can be very violent. And when you are beaten up once, the second time, you feel real fear. Keeping a distance to the youngsters is a form of dehumanization. Not being in contact, in the Australian jail youth facility, it was about the Aboriginals. And Aboriginals aren't people, they say. It just were Aboriginals, it were not all the youngsters, only the Aboriginals. When you dehumanize our youngsters, they become clients or offenders or it's easier to repress them. Rationalization is as well a psychological way of a danger for repression. When you say, we are doing a very good job in our facility, we keep those criminals inside and create a safe outside. It's good to punish them, because they are here for punishment. When that's your rationalization, when you think that's the truth, with a capital T, it's allowed to punish them. In a review of, amongst others, Sophie, about does punishment work in secure youth care, it proved to be, it doesn't even work. And when it doesn't work, why should we? But when we think, as a rationalization, punishment is a good thing to do, it's normal to punish our children. There are as well interpersonal processes. When a team leader says, we are doing it this way, as a team member, you try to follow your leader. A bit quarrel with your leader is allowed, but every day saying, you're wrong, you can't do that, you're afraid of your job. So you're doing what the leader asks at a certain level. That's very difficult for those leaders, because they should be the role models. But not every human being is perfect. So in every institution, there is a look-alike. Everyone wants to look like his boss, his leader, at a certain level. When the team says, all your team members said, this is normal, this is the way we act here, as a new team member, you try to do exactly the same. I see you smiling, maybe you recognize it. And there is a team culture. You like to act like your team members. The same belonging the youngsters aim at is you like to belong to your team. So it's a very normal thing to do, is acting like your neighbor. And talking about the cell phone from yesterday, when you don't ask the ethical questions and the climate is everything is allowed here, repression occurs very quick. On an organizational level, you have a very big task to position your institution between punishment or treatment. Is a jail a prison? Is that for punishment or is that for treatment? Should it be under the Ministry of Justice or the Ministry of Care? I plead for the latest one, although the Ministry of Justice is our host today, so I can't repress too much. But actually, I do think treatment and care is very, very important. But every institution, every country has to position his organization on that scale. How is the hierarchy in the organization? Do you have a real boss or do you have a leader? What's allowed? Yesterday you told me, as a woman, it's a hard way in a man's masculine world. I think that's true. What is the kind of leadership you have in an institution? Is it more feminine, more male? Is it more masculine repressive or masculine permissive? Of course, not all the men are bad. Is there a person-environment fit? When the culture in an institution is very structured and you're an unstructured person, you shouldn't work there. When it's a very unstructured organization, a very loose organization, and you're almost an autistic person, it's a very hard working place. Is there a fit between the human resource management? Is there a good search for good personnel fitting the environment? And you come to staff selection. And when repression is incorporated in the organization, you can't see it anymore. Because that are the normal routines, that are the rules. Everyone knows we use cameras. I didn't know I become a movie star. There's a camera over there. But in our secure institutions, we have cameras everywhere. The panopticon, Foucault calls it. You never know when you're videotaped. You never know if you're looked at. We have more or less hundreds of rules. You're not allowed to, you're not allowed to, you're not. Do we have enabling signs? We allow you to. In the classroom, I'm responsible for 18 schools in special education as well, amongst them secure facilities. Do we have enabling signs? You're enabled to use your phone here to search Wikipedia. We enable you to make contact to your neighbor to discuss this topic, instead of you're not allowed to take notes from your neighbor. Can we change rules from enabler to enablers? Everyone knows teams that work very, very, very hard and don't have time for reflection. That's a risk. And everyone knows it's always in another facility, not in your own, that there are colleagues who are beating up youngsters, that there are colleagues who repress or who make sexual, unacceptable remarks to girls. it's always somewhere else. But those are examples of repression. So during this research, Sophie told and wrote more and more extensive form of a definition. And she added things. Repression is a series of transactional processes. Transactional, it's between persons, between youth, authority figures, and the organizational approach. And the structure, characterized by an authority figure, that's the same, intentionally acting in a way that harms youth, or unlawfully, arbitrarily depriving the youth in their autonomy. And it's fueled by institutionalization, intrapersonal processes, as I told you, fear, rationalization, lack of empathy, dehumanization, and mediated by interpersonal processes like socialization and identification. And only when you recognize in your institution repression, you can take corrective measures for yourself. And that recognition is very difficult, because it's your blind spot. And recognizing your blind spot is the most difficult thing to do. Asking our youngsters give some insights. And one of the ways looking for what youngsters experience as repressive is asking them. It sounds so simple, but I think that's the main thing. The main thing of the measurements of Pierre and his colleagues. These are results of 40, 50 interviews Sophie and I analyzed throughout what is repression in the voices of youngsters. And especially boys experience provocations. It can be their masculinity that they are easily to provoke. But when they have been provoked, what occurs is a battle. What ends up that the boy goes to his room and is locked up. And that's what they mention. Oh, I was provoked. When you recognize that you provoke your youngsters by humor, by whatever, be aware of it. They often say, it's useless to discuss with my staff about a rule because they never listen. And we told, okay, you have to go to communicate with each other. But communication is not the same as listening. And listening is not the same as, like Pierre said, okay, you ask and we do it. Communication is as well saying no. But listening, feeling heard, is very important. We hinder autonomy now and then. Girls and boys in secure facilities more often tell us we like to do things but we are not allowed. Giving a voice in a changing the policy. We don't hear it from youth in prison. Although we think it's more repressive and there's less autonomy. But our youngsters say, yes, that's part of the deal. We are in here, so we don't have autonomy. Maybe that's a system fault. Think about that, please. More and more, and I'm very glad with the results of the growth in Estonia and the educational part I told yesterday, in some cases I was jealous from the facility I saw yesterday. Meaningful occupation, the right for doing, is very, very important. Meaningful occupations, meaningful stay is very important in our facilities. Girls are looking for growth, progress on their personal development. Boys are mainly telling us about doing what is expected to leave the facility as soon as possible. Those are different motivations, but meaningful is a word that is person-centered, and every person has his own sense of meaning. So try to figure out what's meaningful for your client, for your youngster, for your... That's what significance, meaningfulness is about. Arbitrary acting sounds normal as base for repression. He is allowed and I'm not. All our youngsters saying it all day. But as a school teacher, one of my formal jobs, when I said, when there's a quarrel at the right side of the room, I said, please lower your voice. When I was as a kid in school, when one person was talking, everybody had to sit in this way. Because when one was wrong, everyone was punished. And I thought, that's not true. I shouldn't stay longer in a classroom because my neighbor was talking and I wasn't. And that's what we're doing in youth care very often. We lock youngsters in because some have a trouble, or some have to go to the school, or a lawyer is coming. And it feels like punishment for the boys and girls that have to go to their rooms, and they didn't misbehave. But we do it because it's so easy. Sometimes we even say, we as a staff have to negotiate some things, and all the kids go to their rooms and are locked in. Because we need a pause or a discussion. I think that's the acting I'm talking about. I talked about this slide and I promised to keep up the pace, so I skipped this one. The interaction with staff. Youth not only experience repression depending on how staff acts, but how they interact with each staff member. Sometimes we talk about staff as a group and interchangeable persons, but every youngster has his favorite social worker. And being recognized as an individual means very much to the youngster, but means as well very much to the person in charge. Strange enough, we didn't expect that, but some of our youngsters said, we can imagine that this staff member is very anxious for me. And I feel pity with him. He has five boys to look after, and 4 of them are very aggressive. Wow, what a tough job he has. We don't see our youngsters as empathic persons, feeling empathic with the tough side of our jobs, but they really are. They know when they're mean, they know when they are aggressive, and they know they cause sometimes a lot of trouble, and they feel pity for you. But are you talking about that sometimes? Trust, communication are very important things for building up a real interaction. Rationalization I talked about in the beginning. Youngsters talk about rationalization as well. But they do the same. And it's quite fun to hear. Sometimes it's right, I'm in jail. what should I expect other than being in jail, that I got punished, I go to my room, I got locked in? I'm very glad my three girls don't say that every day. It's strange, but we think that it's normal to do things in jail. As well the youngsters as the staff. Do we question that kind of questions? Do we question our behavior, our thoughts? We see it more in youth prisons than in secure youth care. Can we change this? Now, this is an equal talk, as Pierre just told. It's not a quick fix. Supervision is important. I would call it otherness. It's very wise. Just ask someone from the neighborhood to enter your facility a day and let him or her tell you what they saw. And they see remarkable things you see every day, and you don't see them anymore as special. It's promising for your own feeling. They recognize your kind of work, but they see as well all kinds of repression you never see anymore. Inspiring leaders is important. Discussing ethical dilemmas is very, very important. Take the mobile phone. Yesterday we talked very shortly about, is it possible to sell the products you make in a facility and earn a little bit of pocket money when you're inside an institution? Yeah, it's very difficult. There are rules. It's the money of public affair from the Justice Department. But every youngster who does a job, who washes the car of his dad or of mom, can get a little bit of money. When you make carpets, is it possible to sell them? Those ethical questions, can you earn a little bit of money when you're in a facility? Can you be meaningful for other persons? Can you give lessons at regular schools about your life and take part of a lesson cyclus in regular education? Is it allowed or not? I don't have the answers. But asking those questions are very important. Is it necessary to close the doors in an institution, the inside doors between the first and second floor, or the second and the third floor, or could it be open? When should they be closed? When should they be open? Those minor ethical questions are of major importance. Should the television be switched on the Russian or on the Estonian television? What's the language used? To name perhaps a difficult question in Estonia. But who are your youngsters? What are their native tongues? And do you really connect? Is it the rule because in Estonia we use the Estonian language? What do we do with the Russian language? I was glad to see Russian and Estonian books in the library. Those are all ethical questions talking about repression. Maybe the most important, in my opinion, is shared decision making. And when I have 5 more minutes, I will go in shared decision making. Shared decision making is in medical literature a very big topic. When you have rheumatism and you have a chronic disease, you are manager of your own disease and life, and you talk about with your physician, what should I do, what's the best, what are my options, what are my risks, and together you can decide what your treatment will be the next half year or year. In youth care, especially in secure facilities, the role of parents, brothers and sisters, siblings, on treatment discussions are very small. And compared to shared decision making, some of our youngsters have a kind of chronic attention deficit. And I don't mean ADHD, but a deficit of real attention from the parents, the siblings, and the treatment. It's a restriction of autonomy. Is it possible to give them more autonomy in shared decision making? That means every youngster, you should talk about the choices he has. Is it necessary to give him a cognitive training, or psychological support, or social support, or should he go to weaving, inside sporting, outside sporting? What are the choices in a certain facility? And talking about the choices, the treatment and the security options that are available, when a youngster has a preference, give him more details about that option. What are the risks? What are the benefits? Do you know the results from research or from your practical experience? And is it possible to have a part in the decision-making process? That does not mean I want to go outside and he or she leaves, but what are the options? Now, there are no options for going out. Okay, what are the options for spending my time and working on my problem inside? Not every decision is risk-free. And then you come to the ethical discussions. Deciding what's best in secure facilities, the decision what's best for this youngster is often lowered underneath safety issues. And that's the point I'm doubting. It's about security or about growth and participation in the future. That means you have a lot to explain to the youngsters. That means that you have your own feelings and emotions. And sometimes you feel in your stomach, this can't be true for this person. Please tell the youngster, I don't trust you now. This can't be good. Why not? I don't know. But it gives me a bad feeling when you go that way. Talking about emotion in secure care is not normal. But ethical questions is about challenging what's normal in a certain situation. Explaining the choices. Consequently asks parents, siblings, youngsters, what is your attention? What do you want to reach? That's the perspective Pierre was talking about. What's the capacity of the youngster? When I was 12 years old, I liked to be a professional cyclist, and I thought that would be a very good perspective for me. But I was not that healthy, I was not that strong. But as a youngster, you have your dreams. Sometimes, in growing up, you have to look where your dreams meet reality. That's where you become a grown-up person. When choices can't be followed, as a professional, you have to say why. You don't have to say, okay, these are the rules. This can't be. Rules are made for a certain reason. Explain the reason and don't give just the rule. This was what I like to share with you. I don't have solutions. I have lots of questions about how do we in the Netherlands, abroad, in Estonia, work with those ethical questions that the secure part becomes repression And that's exactly what we don't want to happen to our youngsters. Thank you for inviting me.
So, who wants to ask something or say something? So many hands I can't choose. So, no? You have a question, very good.
Okay, so I think Pierre told also that he was quite surprised that the education here is so good. Are you also going to take Estonian education back to Holland? Because education is important for everybody to participate in the normal life, real life. And have you found out why is in Holland not the education is not like here in Estonia? Is that cultural? Is that the system?
I heard yesterday a lot of equalities and comparable challenges. I think the educational results are comparable. Growth is comparable in Netherlands as Estonia. But to give a quite good example is about where you make your notes for the children. In the Netherlands, we struggle with combining the notes of the educational system and the care system. And I heard from an initiative to combine them. We're working on it in the Netherlands, but we don't succeed. So I listened very well, and when I am very interested, and I hope to hear this afternoon more about how to combine them. In the Netherlands, we have, and that's vocational training is a word I heard a lot yesterday and even this morning already. In the Netherlands, there is a very focus on the receiving diplomas, because a diploma is the best way to enter the society. But for our youngsters with mild intellectual disabilities, diploma is not always the level you should reach. And I was very happy to see yesterday the woodworking, the traditional, what I would call arts and crafts part that give meaning and build up the capacity to become a professional worker, not focused on the diploma, but on the ability. One of the struggles as well in Estonia as in Netherlands is the transfer from a secure unit really to a job. And in the Netherlands, there are different ministries responsible for those transfer. And in the secure unit, they are very enthusiastic when the youngsters get a diploma. And the Ministry for Work, for social, the social part, the social, for the employment part, is a different ministry and start to count at another level a year later. So there is a gap between in our system. And I'm very curious, and I hope to hear this afternoon something about it, how you make that transfer from a social, from the secure unit to work. Because it's in all the countries in Europe where I came a problem. So yes, I take some questions with me, and those are the questions. And I invite you this afternoon to stimulate me with new ideas.
I want to a little bit talk more about the rules, because on the shared decision making you told about the importance of giving reasons why we have rules like this, why you can't do this. So this probably is also preceded with the shared decision making on rules between staff.
Yeah.
So it's, I think this is very often the problem that we have in Estonia, that the rules come from somewhere, and the guards and the social workers, they are not able to explain the rules. And I have also 2 examples. I think just so that you know, Chris was at the Valge Center in Tapa yesterday, so that's where your examples come from that you gave. And you told also about the example that whether to watch Russian TV or Estonian channels. So in prisons, we solved it in a way that we don't allow anyone to watch Russian TV. So an example. Another example about the rules in Tartu prison. Was it that way that in Tartu you can use blue pen, only blue pen, and you are not allowed to use other colors?
You have a red one, I see.
No, it's just looks red. So, but in other prisons, it's also allowed to use a black pen. So these are very small things, and I believe that the staff has really hard time to explain these things to prisoners. So how is it in Holland? How much aware is the staff in your institutions in explaining the rules? So are they aware of the reasons of the rules, and how do you work on this?
It's a very good example, thank you. The most important things is question the rules, and when a rule can't explain, it shouldn't be a rule. And as a director in my institution, I say when we can't explain why this is a rule, we should skip the rule. Because every rule that can't explain is a cause for aggression, for problems. That means that you have a lot to think about. You can't change it in 1 month, not even in a year. But when I hear about blue or black writing pens, excuse me, I start to laugh. I don't want to have a quarrel in my ward about black or blue writing pens, the color of... Until someone tells me why it's very important. And that's recognizing the message.
Okay, can I, so I'm a guard now. So there was once a case when someone wrote an application, and actually you can't understand whether with the black pen it's the authentic signature.
Yes.
So someone did it, so now it's forbidden. How do you feel?
Yes. I was expecting that answer. Of course, that's a very normal thing in a rule-based organization. When there's one problem, and I know it, we had a youth prison that's closed now, one of the 2 that's closed, what Peer mentioned. Everything that went wrong, our ministry said, you have to change the whole system so it can never happen again. And so writing with a black pen, and it was a falsification, a false signature or a real signature. When you're working about trust and mutual contact, you shouldn't punish everyone to write with a blue pen, because only one kid was so clever to use a black pen to change a signature. So it's about trust, and what I mentioned about rules that are fair is it fair for everyone to use a blue pen because of a misuse of one black writing pen? So that's the question, and I would ask the question to the youngsters in the ward. So when that's the answer, I said, now, it was the case a year ago that one of your colleagues wrote with a black pen and wrote his signature, and he had 2 days off out of jail. He was very happy. He returned after 2 days, but it was not allowed. So we say it has to do with a blue pen, so we're very, very secure that the signature is correct. What do you think? And most of the youngsters said, bullshit, whatever, what happens. We shouldn't change this. When everyone agrees, I say, okay, but when one of you make a false signature and goes out of jail without permission, next day you come to me and we have a debate about it. Want I will trust you now. We agree on trust. And don't interfere in this trust. Because otherwise we change it and you all agree. And then you have a mutual understanding. It's a small example and it's very difficult, but every institution has that difficult rules from years ago. Once happened that, and now we all behave like we can't think ourselves. So making real a contact makes a shared decision, and that shared decision is, okay, we agree on using blue and black pens. We can explain that, but when you break the rule, those are the consequences. Yeah.
Am I only the one who's questioning? Sorry. You said about the explaining of the rules, and I found I'm not originally Dutch, but come from another culture, and I found very difficult when I had my daughter to explain her, because it was just regular. The first thing that she learned was why, and she kept on asking that, and I found out at the beginning I was very nervous, very, because of my Dutch education, I thought I have to explain her, otherwise I'm not good mother. But I found out that sometimes also it doesn't need to explain everything.
Yes. Every parent knows,
you have
because
to
I
keep
say it,
this balance.
you listen.
Yeah.
Exactly. If that's the problem, and everyone will recognize it. You have children, kids, youngsters who say, why? Because I'm the decision maker. Yeah. When you say that in raising up your children, every parent knows that there is a moment that you come, okay, this is the border, and I decide. That's exactly the structure Peer was talking about. It's not why the whole day. You can, in a structure, build which rule can be questioned and why. And there are so much implicit rules. Entering a ward yesterday, I saw the shoes on at the side of the room, the shoes of the children. And no one from the adults entering the room took off his shoes. And I felt embarrassed. I didn't know whether I should take off my shoes, and there was no rule. Perhaps there was a rule in Estonia, but I didn't know. Every youngster entering a ward has that feeling, what are the implicit rules and what are the explicit rules? That feeling is very normal, and you recognize it in your institution. The own ward, you have to wear your shoes. The others don't do, because I saw in one of my own wards that teachers in a class asked the pupils under 12 to take off their shoes, not because of the noise, not because of the dirt, because they thought they can't run away to outside because they don't wear shoes. And it's wet outside, it's raining today in the Netherlands, as ever. So it was a prevention, a very repressive measure, I think, that all the children walk barefoot, so they can't go out. What are the explicit and what are the implicit rules? And by questioning those rules, you know what's the culture, what are the reasons. And you're right, questioning whole day makes life very difficult.
Maybe some other example. If children from a youth prison go on leave outside, they get some pocket money with them to be able to go on the bus or buy some small things. And it's generally a rule that if you come back, you have to hand in the excess money, and the officer has to count it and write it down. So I was once there, and some boy or was a young man came in, and he handed over the extra money, and the worker there, he got it and put it in a box without counting it. And then the young man said, "Why don't you count it? It's a rule here." And then the officer said, "No, but I trust you." And at that moment, I could see a smile from ear to ear. And afterwards, I talked to this boy, and I said, "Do you think you need this rule?" He said, "Yes, of course we need this rule, but the fact that this officer trusted me is for me more worth than 1,000 rules." And I think this is especially what Chris means. You know, we need to have more trust and less rules.
Okay, so thank you, Chris. So it was
a pleasure.
really good. So we now have 10 more minutes. So I would really like to give a possibility to share something from other touch researchers here. So just to explain, they are students at Leiden. Vabandust, ma peaks rääkima eesti keeles. Sorry, I will now turn to Estonian and explain something. So, but still microphone, yes. Et siis iga kord, kui me teeme neid uuringuid, siis on meil kaasas olnud või on siis sellel meeskonnal kaasas olnud ka üliõpilased, kes on enamasti olnud ka, kellel on pikk juba töökogemus noortega või peredega ja kes õpivad siis magistriprogrammis just kinniste asutuste teemal ning ühelt poolt me anname neile kogemust, teiselt poolt on nende kogemus ka meile hästi väärtuslik ja seekord oli siis siin uuringuks kaasatud 4 inimest, kes siis ka tegid intervjuusid, jagasid küsimustikke ja nüüd ma tahan neile anda lihtsalt ka võimalust öelda 1-2 mõtet selle kohta, mida neil on jagada. So if you want, then you can say 1 or 2 thoughts. It's not anything compulsory. So if you have anything to share from the past days and from your experience, then now is the option. Anyone? Yeah?
Yeah, that's okay. My name is Chantal. I'm a student, so work as a social worker on a high school for kids with special needs. Well, the last few days were very interesting and also very learning for me, so it was a good thing to do. The thing that I most saw from everybody is they want to do something but also need a hand from everybody who is working. So some of them mentioned, I want to be a good role model, but sometimes can't do it by myself or need the help. So that's a big thing that I noticed. Maybe some of you want to share something?
What I noticed was that when you question them, I think you said also yesterday, when you question them, if you are the director of this institution, what would you like to change? And there were the answers were so meaningful, so that was something that I thought, wow, even the kids were with low intellectual things, they told us such a things that you thought, okay, this is really something that I will also take back home and even use in my own family, in my own, not in a closed detention kind of institution, but even in open interaction with the people. This was one of the things that I was really surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, and something that mentioned, one of the guys were mentioning to me something small, but he said to me on that question, I want to have a Christmas tree. That was just one thing, and it was like, it's normal for me to have a Christmas tree back home. But he was in and out of prison for 13 years. So I think it wasn't normal for him. So the only thing he wanted was a Christmas tree.
Good morning. I'm Hisham Abulil. I'm a student in my first year of the master, and Mr. Peer is my teacher. I want to summarize talking about the rules. Most of the guards which I met, they said to me that they are working only to perform the rules. And the rules come from outside, and we have to implement it and to perform it inside. Nobody of the prisoners have the right to discuss here about, and they have to obey us. Prisoners who they do not obey us, they have to be punished. And I remarked also that there is no interaction between the prisoners and the guards. Some of them, he said to me that the most suitable place for the prisoners is here in this jail. Why? Because they are here secure, and if they go out, then they will make big problems. Thus, it's better to them to stay here forever. And he was defending the rules and the law of this land very, very hard. And I thought that he is the owner of the prison. The prisoners are complained very much over the rules. And they know that they have absolutely no right to discuss or to say anything about the rules, only to do what the guards are asked from them. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Rineke. I'm also a student. I just want to share what some boy told me yesterday. He was telling us that he was not allowed to going out for 1 year because he was taking the walkie-talkie from the security, and I was asking him, why did you take that walkie-talkie? And he told me, I like walkie-talkies, I want to play with it. So he told me it's fair that they say you're not going allowed, but I think no one asked him what's the reason that you take that walkie-talkie away. And I think it depends what's the reason. When you ask that boy, that's the reason. It makes a great difference, I think.
Okay, thank you. You have one more thought? Yes?
Yes, sorry, I have to tell you a lot. But what I also noticed between the young in Netherlands and then here in Estonia, that when you talk to them in Holland, they say, I have right to do this. And I have, for example, I have right to see my parents. I have right to have my mobile phone. It is my private. It belongs to me. And here, this kids, they told us not in the way that they have right to do, or but in the way that they understand that they did something wrong, even they were not proud about that. Most of them, they didn't want to tell us why they are there, the reason. They're ashamed of the things that they have done it. But yeah, they told us on a different way, on a so that was the difference that I thought, wow, they were very aware of, they were complaining about the rules, but they were also aware of that by the rules, they will change. They need the rules. But also, they told us that the rules are too much, too strict, and that's what I want to tell you.
So there's the discussion when someone is put into the closed institution, so whether this should be the punishment or are also the conditions and the rules part of the punishment. So it's a very important discussion.